Hey guys, welcome back to Hobby Sauce. In this video, I'm going to show you how to make blocking terrain that looks like this. Let's get saucy.
Hobby Sauce.
Welcome back guys, and thanks for coming. Now today we're going to make blocking terrain that looks like this. Now, we're going to build on some of the practices that we learned in our hill video, so I do have a hardboard base, just like I showed you how to make in that hill video, and if you don't know how to make one of these, take a gander up here. Now, this is not as big as our hill video, and you can see this is blocking terrain, so it doesn't have to be a minimum of 6 inches or anything like this. Make this to any degree you want to. But what we're going to use to make the base of this, the base part of it, when I say that, not the actual base, is cork. Now, this is cork, and I'm a doofus and deleted some of my footage, or I could have shown you the full thing that this was, but it was actually wrapped around kind of like this to make a tree trunk, and that's what this is. This is bark off of a cork tree. You can get this on eBay pretty cheap. I got a very large piece for $15. If you don't need a large piece, you can go cheaper than that, or you could go to your pet store and go to the aquarium section, and a lot of times they're covering this. But I cut that into smaller portions, like this. And you can see if we put this together, it's kind of starting to look like what we're after, and we'll get to the specifics on how to move there in a minute. But to cut it, you are going to need some sort of a tool. So if you're on the cheap side and don't have power tools, you can use just a handsaw. That will cut through the cork. It just takes a little bit of time. But if you have power tools, maybe a Dremel, a jigsaw, or any other type of tool that's going to work, go ahead and use those. It's pretty easy. Now, other than the cork bark, we're also going to need a couple of other things. I'm using hot glue to glue these bases down, but you could use something else. I'm making a lot of these for a tournament, so I think hot glue is the fastest way when you're doing it en masse. But if you wanted to use wood glue or something like that, you just need some way to hold it down. And I'm also going to use this. This is expandable foam. Again, something that really makes making it en masse super easy. But if you didn't have this, you could just go ahead and use whatever you have to fill it up. Hopefully you have some spare styrofoam that was pieces that I told you to keep, and you can use those to fill in gaps. And you can use other things, but this is a really good gap filler, and it's like $4 at your local hardware store. It's expanding foam. You'd find it in the insulation section. With all of that and the basic tools that you should already have, we should be able to make this. So I'm going to go ahead and show you how it's done.
So you can see that I've taken all of the cork bark pieces and I've cut them to pieces that I think will be a good base. And now I'm taking the hot glue and I'm just gluing it to that masonite base that we have there. When you glue, it's always really important to apply a little pressure. I'm probably not applying enough, to be completely honest. You probably want to hold it for 10 to 15 seconds when you do it to make sure you have a really good bond. But I'm making sure those are glued to the base. Now, they're not glued to each other yet, so I'm just going to kind of shoot in through the seam line here. There's a lot of things that we're going to do to fill this out, so this does not have to look pretty. We are only worried about structure right now, making sure that it stays put and does not move. And there we have it. They're all glued together. Easy peasy. There's one of the ones that I worked on off camera. And now I'm pulling up the one that I was working on camera. You can see how well those stick together. This is our expanding foam. So you just take it and shoot it in. Now you're going to see right here that I had a little bit of a malfunction. I'm spraying on that and nothing's coming out. Had an old can. I guess this can happen. This has never happened to me before when I use these. But we're just going to have a little bit of a malfunction. It will start working in a minute here. There we go. I think we've got it. Woo! There we go. That's what we're after. So you just stick it in there and spray. And it's okay to overshoot this because in a moment we're going to clean all this up. So anything that you don't like, any gap, any hole that you're not a big fan of, just fill it up. And we'll just go ahead and shoot. Notice I'm shooting on the end line too. Some of this cork didn't land perfectly flat, and that's okay. That's what this is for. And this makes a very irregular pattern when it's all done. And because it's irregular, it's going to look better. And that's just a great tip. When you're making terrain or anything that's a natural structure, it's always good to use natural processes if you can help it. those natural processes will look better than if you meticulously sculpted something to look natural. And even if you do that, you're probably not going to be 100% successful. This is easier and better. Left this overnight and they have expanded. You see that's a lot bigger than it was before, but it's really just a little too big. So I'm going to take my hobby knife and I'm just going to cut this down. You see it cuts pretty easily there. You can also just pluck this off. You'll notice I got close enough. Pluck it. Just deal with it. And we're just going to cut all the way down on this thing. Cut it flush or to whatever shape and thing you want. Pull it off. You can pluck it off. You can cut it off. Combination of the two. Whatever makes sense. Now this doesn't have to look perfect yet because we're going to have some other things that we're going to do before this is all done. But we're just going to move across. I'll speed this up a little bit. And we're complete. And that's what we look like. You can see there's still some rough edges, and that's okay, because we're going to move this further along the process and cover those up again. So what we have here, well, this is the completed version. All of them have been cut. And then we're just going to take some spackle. I use this. This is something that I used on my wall previously. It's pink. It will dry white. Doesn't matter. We're going to paint it anyway. But we just press it up across. The top of that kind of had a flat surface I didn't like, so I'm giving it a little texture with the spackle. And then we're just going to take a popsicle stick and press this up against areas. So if there's a gap or any sort of surface that you don't like, we're just going to put it in here. Whatever the expanding foam didn't fix. You see right there I have a little bit of a gap in between the cork bark and the expanding foam. Just going to cover it up. Press that alongside. Takes a little bit. You can just try to make it look as irregular as possible. And when you're done, you leave it be.
And with that, we have these complete. Now we still need to paint them, but you can see it looks pretty solid. And once we paint this, you won't be able to tell one spot from the other. The spackling and all that adds a little bit of texture. The styrofoam adds texture. It's all really good. One of the great things about this is, in my experience at least, these styrofoam pieces can take spray paint. So I'm going to go ahead and spray paint these black, and then we're just going to dry brush them up. There are hundreds of ways to paint rocks. All right, guys, I will be back in a moment, and I'll show you how to paint these. All right, guys, and it's all clear. So what we have now are some pieces that look like this, okay? They're very black, and we're gonna paint them from here. So what we're gonna do is just a really simple dry brush technique. Now, if you wanted to paint these using a leopard spotting technique or any number of other techniques using rocks, go ahead and paint it the way that you want to paint it, okay? Because whatever works for you at this point works for you. The shape is there. But I'm going to show you a quick, easy way to paint these that doesn't take very long. And we're just going to dry brush it. And if you don't know what dry brushing is, I'm about to show you. So I just have some cheap paint. I got this at my local hobby store. Just cheap, okay? Don't spend a lot of money on this. But I wouldn't use your model paints because you're going to use a lot of this and it's just not cost effective. So I'm just going to pour a little bit out. You see that? I'm actually probably going to get a decent amount here. And the reason for that is because I have 7 of these to paint. Because I'm doing this for Capital City Clash. If you haven't gone there, go. And what I'm going to do is I'm just going to take this, get a little bit on my brush. I have a big brush here. The reason I have a big brush is because I have a big thing to paint. If I had a bigger brush, I'd be using that because I don't want to use a little brush on here. It'd take forever. And I'm just going to get most of this off. So you can see if I run this across my skin, it's picking it up, but not just crazy, okay? And now that I have most of the paint off my brush, I'm gonna just go over this, okay? I'm gonna zoom in the camera so that you can see better.
All right, so I have that paint on my brush, and I'm just gonna vigorously move it across. What that's doing is it's catching all of the raised areas, but it's not catching the deep areas. So the black is going to register as shadow, and the gray is going to register as the mid-tone. Now you could dry brush a lot of different layers on top of each other, but we're just going to go with 2 colors for this. This is basic terrain, and I'm making a lot of them, so I don't have time to give it my utmost attention. but you could spend a lot of time getting a lot of different colors and layers on here.
And now that's complete and dry. You want to give this 5 to 10 minutes and then it should be good for another coat. So what we're going to do now is we're just going to come in with another coat. And this time I'm going to get a lot less paint on my brush. The other time I got still a decent amount of paint on my brush because what I wanted to do is cover this really well because it's mostly going to be gray. The blacks are the shadows and then these are going to be the highlights. Now you could use straight white. I do not like using straight white, ever. You very rarely see straight white in nature, and your eye always registers the lightest color as white anyway, so don't worry about using something that's a little bit less. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take this white, okay, I'm going to add it into the gray that I have left over. This does not have to be perfect, it just needs to be a lighter color. So that's about a 50-50 mix right there, okay? And I'm just gonna mix this together. There we go. Okay, so you can see that's a lot lighter than the previous color. Dry brushing is always best if you do it in small coats. So if I don't think this is bright enough in the end, I can just put another coat on. I can put more white in it and build it up even slower. But you always will have a better result if you do less paint, more layers. If you just get your brush loaded and kind of flap it on there, you're gonna get a really fast result and it's gonna look like it. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna take this and again, I'm gonna pour it out like this. But this time I'm gonna take a paper towel too and just kind of do that. I apologize that I'm blinking at you. I got something in my eye just then. Okay, so the way you can tell is if you pull this across your skin, it should just barely pick it up, okay? I'm gonna pull the camera down so that you can see what I'm doing when I paint this on.
Same song, different verse. We're not gonna hit every section at this point, just the top sections or any raised edges. This is gonna register as our highlight, so it doesn't have to be across the whole thing. But when you're done, there you have it. Now we're ready to flock.
And with that, the painting is complete. But now we need to flock it. So we're going to turn this into this.
This should look similar to our hill video. I just have PVA and water, about a 50-50 mix, and I'm pushing it across the base. But I'm not going to stop at the base this time. I'm also going to go on parts of the rock. Whatever looks good to you, you can do as little or as much of this as you want. I think that if it's taller, you should do a little bit of this. If it's shorter, you can do a lot of this, and it looks really good. But when I have the PVA on, I'm just going to start with the flock. So I'm going to take my darkest and deepest color first. That's my dark greens. I'm just going to throw it on. I don't have to fully cover this because I'm going to put some other flocks too. We're going to make a little bit of a blend to make it look more realistic. So now that the dark greens are on, I'm going to kind of take my blended turf. This is more of a yellow mixture. This will look more like dead grass, and we're going to use this sparingly. And then we're going to come over with the burnt grass and make it come together. Taking that up, I'm just going to put that all across the surface. A lot of this is going to fall over. That's okay, but it's going to pick up anywhere where glue remained. And that's good enough if you wanted to. Now, I wanted to add some clump foliage too. I should have added that first. That's my mistake, but I'm going to go ahead and add it now. I'm going to have a booger of a time getting glue on here because it's covered with wet flock. So I'm going to go ahead and skip forward. It was a mess, but I do have it set. And now I'm just going to add some clump foliage. You can put this along the base or anywhere that you think looks good. I think it looks really good up on the top to get some really rough grass up there, but this just adds another layer. And once the clump foliage is done, it's over. If you wanted to be smart, you would do this beforehand, before you put the other flock on.
And there we have it, guys. Totally done. This is what we got. So you can see that this is really hard. What I've done is I've gone ahead and gone through with another layer of PVA, just a seal, just like we did in that hill video. And beyond that, we're done, man. You could add more intricate pieces on it if you want to. You could add more bits. You could actually do a smaller version of this for maybe a multi-base or anything else that you were working on, but it's pretty versatile technique. I hope it's helpful. There are ways to step it up that you can find on YouTube or ask me on PM and I can tell you, but For right now, that concludes another tutorial video. So stick around, we'll get some more things to you. And for right now, stay saucy.
Happy sauce.